Students, and welcome to our first week of all virtual learning. So everybody is now virtual. So I will continue making these videos and we will have these available for those who need it. So today we are going to learn about forest types of Wisconsin. So I want to make this essentially this learning very applicable to our state. So I think it's important that we learn about our state, learn about our area, and what kind of tree species live here. All right, so today's daily question is from what you read on the website on that worksheet, Why Leaves Change Color. I want you to think about what were those 5 forest types that they talked about. All right, so think about that. See if you can recall those. Make sure that you turn in that worksheet. If you didn't, I will accept it through Wednesday night. However, after that, it will be late. All right, so we are going to talk about each of these 5 forest types one at a time. All right, so they are the boreal forest or northern forest, the coniferous forest, mixed forest types. So mixed forest, we're going to learn, is a particular type of forest that kind of bridges the gap between the north and south part of our state. We're going to talk about barrens as well as forest wetlands. All right, so you are going to see this map made by the U.S. Geological Survey back in the 1960s as we go along in the lesson. And I want to point out that you should be filling out the guided notes as we go through this. So let me take a peek and go to classwork. So this will be posted. It is not yet posted, but on this assignment, there will be guided notes. And you will notice that these guided notes are just correspond to today's lecture. So go ahead and please fill those out. Please, please, please. So you don't have to turn it in per se for credit. However, these are going to be super useful on future quizzes. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Make sure you do these notes. The notes today look a little bit lengthy, but it's mostly because of all the diagrams and pictures. But let us get started. So use those notes and let's jump back into our forest types. All right, so you can see this map by the U.S. Geological Survey has a bunch of different features on it, and you can see all the different ecosystems in different colors. So reference this key and reference those colors carefully and the textures, because subtle differences in, say, green encode different ecosystems. All right, so the 5 main types, as I talked about before, the boreal or northern forest, coniferous forest, the barrens, the forest wetlands, and the mixed forest, and I will talk about them in that order. So note that on this map, there are more ecosystems than the 5 forest types I'm talking about. So some of these wouldn't even be a forest at all. So prairie, we wouldn't classify as a forest. Because, and as you're going to watch on that separate video, which will be important to answer the questions on the Google form for today's lesson, the other short 5-minute video is on forests. And we define a forest by having trees, which are woody perennials. So we talked about perennials. Anything that's woody has a wood trunk, meaning it's a fairly thick secondary structure, so a thick trunk. All right, so there are many more of these ecosystems than we will kind of talk about today. However, we'll see some of the main types of forests correspond to certain ecosystems on this official Geological Survey map. All right, starting with the boreal forest. So the boreal forest, or the northern forest, if you've ever heard the words aurora borealis, that means northern lights. So borealis or boreal means northern. So a boreal or northern climate it's essentially identified by having a bunch of conifers, having a large percentage of conifers. It is located in the northernmost boundary of Wisconsin, and we're going to see what counties on the next map it is in. Home to white spruce, balsam fir, tamarack, white cedar. So these are all conifers, and then mixed with some white birch and some aspen. So a couple deciduous trees as well. But the majority is going to be conifers. Now, I know this is botany class, but I think it would be I would be forgetting the animals if I didn't talk about them. It is home to animals like the lynx. The lynx is a large cat, a large predatory cat that hunts snowshoe hare, which are large-footed hares that live in the snow. And they're pretty cool looking if you've never seen them. I saw like 15 of them on Isle Royale. The lynx is larger than a bobcat. Its feet are the main distinguishing characteristic that is a lot bigger than the bobcats. And then wolves can also live in the boreal forest. Any animal that can tolerate long, cold, and dry winters. This would be the harshest of our 5 forest types. In terms of where it is located in the state, now you might not know counties too well, and that's okay. I've been learning them better as I walk the Ice Age Trail, which is a trail that goes all throughout Wisconsin. And it actually follows the tension zone, which we're going to talk about later, where the glaciers were. So kind of interesting there. So the counties included in our boreal forest are going to include Door County on the far east. And then as we move westwards, we're going to have Marinette County. So Marinette, the city of Marinette is in Marinette County. Forest County would come next. So places like Crandon and Florence are in Forest County. Vilas County, that's my favorite. My family has a cabin in Vilas County. So Eagle River would be in Vilas County as well as Minocqua. Iron County, so westward of there, as we start to get up into the northern tip of Wisconsin. All right, Iron County, west of there, Ashland County. So the city of Ashland is in Ashland County. Bayfield County, which includes the Apostle Islands, the city of Bayfield. And then Douglas County, which includes Superior, Wisconsin, right at this tip. That might be an important question on the Google form for today. So Superior is at this tip. It was an important port city way back in the day on Lake Superior. All right, so our second forest type is the coniferous forest. And as the coniferous forest, as its name implies, it is mostly going to be consisted of conifers as well. Mostly white pine, shown right here, and red pine. Notice red pine has a lot less boughs or branches that have needles on it. It is a very tall type of tree that is from Norway. So it is originally called the Norway pine. White and red pine, predominantly found in central and northern Wisconsin, so kind of north central. So it isn't quite as cold or quite as dry as the boreal climate. So it is predominantly pine dominated. So that is what distinguishes the coniferous forest. And if we were to take a look at where the coniferous forest is mostly found, the boreal is going to be along kind of those northern counties. And on this map, the boreal is indicated just a little bit differently, but that's okay. For the most part, it's the same. So the coniferous forest is found in the following ecosystems on the map. It would mostly be the pine forest, white pine and red pine. See, it's exactly how we would describe it. That is coded as red. So all of these red areas, notice kind of central and northern Wisconsin is where this coniferous pine forest would be. Mostly pines, all right, with their needles that they keep year-round. All right, next up is the barrens. So as the name implies, these are fairly barren, nutrient-poor areas. Oftentimes they're pretty exposed. So areas like this, actually, barrens and kind of this scrub land is what we kind of would see near the coast by Sheboygan, by Terry Andre, for example, those dunes and scrubs. And scrubland, where you see, say, juniper, crawling juniper and dwarf juniper, some good barrens examples. There are some isolated pockets of barrens in the central and northwestern part of Wisconsin, particularly, though perhaps some along the Lake Michigan lakefront as well. They're sunny and exposed areas, so they would likely get a lot of wind, not a lot of foliage to kind of block the wind. And particularly what grows there would be jack pine, which have these really interesting, these conical shaped cones. Excuse me. So they look like a cone-shaped cone, which not every cone looks like this. And it's pretty interesting because jack pine actually In response to fire, the cones will break open, they'll burst open and release their seeds. So a lot of jack pine and similar fire-adapted species would live out in the western part of the United States, out in like California and Colorado, where the forest fires unfortunately come pretty often. So we would find jack pine in the barrens. We would also find scrub oak. Now, scrub oak, you will not see this type of oak leaf very often in Wisconsin. It's pretty rare. I have never seen a scrub oak leaf except at Maywood. So Maywood, they have a variety of trees in their arboretum where one of which is like a scarlet oak. I believe they have a scrub oak, and they're pretty, pretty interesting leaves, pretty rare leaves. So this would be a hard one to find for your collection. But these are sandy, well-drained soils, nutrient poor, so not every kind of tree could live here. But pines are very hardy and like that sandy soil. And as I said, that's what grows here. On the barrens, there actually is a specific ecosystem called the pine barrens that really corresponds to this forest type. And it is found in this yellow dotted area, so in the northwestern part of the state, not too far from Barron, Wisconsin. Barron, Wisconsin is kind of, a rather barren area. So there's quite a lot of jack pine up there. You wouldn't see these really dense stands of vegetation, but it would be kind of a little bit sparser, as well as in the center part of the state. And I'm not entirely sure geographically where this would associate with. Looks like about south of Stevens Point, perhaps. So, and then if we look where Sheboygan would be on the map, that would correspond to the northern Mesic forest. And we could see there's a couple barrens on here over by the peninsula, Door County Peninsula. Forest wetlands are another type of forest found in wetlands, so areas that are usually, in constant moist soil conditions. And these are mostly seen throughout the southern half of the state based on our soil type there. So these would not be as well drained of soils, not as sandy, so more of a loam or a silt. So that would be where you'd find these. Among forest wetlands, you would find some swamp conifers like tamarack. You would also find some lowland hardwoods, so perhaps cottonwood, ash, maples, red and silver maple as well. So all of these thrive in kind of these lowland, kind of wet conditions. They need a soil that is holds more water, essentially, not as sandy. So this is an ash leaf, and remember last time we talked about this as being oddly pinnate. So it's a compound leaf, cottonwood, simple leaf, silver maple, simple leaf, as well as red maple, simple leaf. The forest wetlands ecosystems on our USGS map correspond to the following areas. So conifer swamps would be in there. So let's take a look at where the conifer swamps are. So wherever we find kind of this area, and I might have forgotten to circle an area or two. Also the lowland hardwood, which honestly is not too commonly seen anywhere else besides the far western part of the state. And that area was actually never touched by glaciers. So that is going to be one of the reasons we'd see that there. And I also want to point out that we might even consider, the sedge meadows. So meadows are a little bit drier like prairies. So even though I circled this, the meadow wouldn't so much be considered a wetland as much as the conifer swamps, which would be in this kind of olive green, which you can see there's quite a lot of that down here in the southeastern part of the state, and the lowland hardwoods in the western part of the state. Mixed forest. Mixed forest is one that really has to require us to look at the history of the geography of our state. So let's go ahead and look at that. So it's found really spread out and distributed throughout our state quite expansively. So it's in the southern part, it's in the northern part, and this is a diverse mixture of coniferous and deciduous trees. So here on the right, we'll see a beech tree. If you want to see beach, you can go to Terry Andre State Park and do that circle walk, or the woodland circle walk, which is right by the beach, coincidentally. Beach by the beach. Here's what the leaves look like. Maple as well. You could find. But we could also include conifers like hemlock and white pine and red pine, along with birch, another deciduous tree, and some varieties of oak and aspen in the mixed forest. Essentially, the mixed forest is like everything kind of combined in a transitional area. So the mixed forest can occur really in many, many different parts of the state. It can be found in the northern mesic forest. The northern mesic forest is characterized by kind of maple, hemlock, and birch. So we kind of start to see a majority of conifers in the northern mesic forest. However, there are not all conifers like we would kind of see in a boreal climate. Almost all conifers in a boreal. In the southern mesic forest would also be a mixed forest, so kind of this southern half of the state. And the southern mesic forest is that slightly lighter color of green, so right here. Kind of south of Sheboygan would be the southern mesic, and then in Sheboygan is the northern mesic forest. Oak savanna could also be put in there. Mixed forest, so oak savanna are more open areas, similar to prairies, but they've got these large stands of oak that are spread out pretty far apart. So we might even rope that in. It covers much of the state. However, it's particularly common, this mixed forest, in what we call the tension zone. The tension zone, which is a geological feature, not so much of a botanical one. But let's talk about it anyways because it's important. So what's the tension zone? It's not if I'm working out and I'm doing an arm curl, the tension in my bicep. It's not that kind of a tension zone. What it is a line of glaciation where the glaciers essentially receded, where they reached before they receded about 10,000 years ago. So it's a line that separates the northern and southern mesic forest, essentially. That's why we could see there was a pretty distinct line. And it separates the northern hardwoods, where the glaciers did come, from the southern hardwoods in the southwestern part of the state, where no glaciation happened. The glaciers did not reach. The glaciers reached the northern part of Wisconsin as well as the eastern part of Wisconsin and formed different lobes that we'll see on a future slide. So for those of you who don't know what a glacier is a slow-moving mass or kind of a river or a sheet of ice formed by the accumulation and compaction or the piling up of snow on mountains or near the poles. And over time, through geological processes that if you wanted to learn more about, you could take Mr. Duncan's geology class and meteorology class. So over time, they move very slowly. So if we think about Wisconsin's history, they carved out our landscape into what it is today, and they shaped it from 70,000 to 10,000 years ago. So when the glaciers essentially started to recede, that was kind of the end of the last ice age, what we consider the ice age, if you've seen that cartoon movie. But essentially, as that happened, and say the woolly mammoths and other of those kind of ice age megafauna or huge animals started to disappear, then we got a repopulation of these forests, and they grew back differently from what they once were. So the mixed forest is really common in the tension zone. South of our tension zone, we had no glaciation or no presence of glaciers. As a result, that is a very hilly landscape, kind of a hummocky terrain. And what hummocky means, kind of up, down, rolling hills like you would see kind of in the Appalachian country, except not nearly as high as that. That is the part of the state where I'm from, southeastern Wisconsin, so down here in Racine County, so I know this area very well, and it's very hilly. Whereas north of the tension zone was glaciation. So the glaciers reached here, and essentially they carved and scraped that landscape down into being relatively flat. Now you can think about areas like Wausau or other areas as exceptions. Wausau is pretty pretty mountainous. So there are exceptions, but you would see many, many, many more caves in the southwestern part of the state. That's what we call the driftless area, where the glaciers didn't reach. So a lot of caves, a lot more bat habitat down here, a lot more bats down here than there would be up here, which is better habitat for them in caves. So if we continue to talk about Wisconsin glaciation, the area, as I talked about and is shown on this map, where the glaciers did not reach, is called the driftless area. Let me move myself over onto this glacier. And that is southwestern Wisconsin. So there wasn't just one big ice sheet. It was multiple ice sheets that moved kind of independent of one another and kind of almost scraped against each other in like that common direction of movement. So we had our superior lobe, and all these were different lobes of different glaciers. And then essentially, but this area in the kind of the gray, the stripy gray, did not ever have glacial activity. More caves and hills here. And the rock structure, if you were to look at the rock strata or the layers of rock that pile up over time, much, much older, considerably older than what you would see here. Maybe hundreds of thousands of years, while our current rock structure up in Sheboygan or up in Vilas County would be quite new in terms of a geologic timescale, only on the order of thousands of years. And thus, because of this glaciation, is why we see different forest types from the southwest and the southern part to the northern part. The north is completely different. All right, so that wraps up our lecture on tree types. So what I want you to do is, so you've watched this lecture, and make sure you fill out the guided notes. Next, you're going to watch the forest video, and I'll flip over to Google Classroom and show you where this assignment is. Watch the forest video, quick 5-minute video, and after both videos, complete this Google form. I'll jump into that Google form, put a random bogus name in here. Make sure you put your real name. But it is 15 questions. There are, I believe, 7 or 8 questions based on the lecture that I just had. And then you'll click next. And there's also 5 or 6 questions based on that 5-minute video on forests. So make sure you watch that video, because that's like half the credit for today's assignment. So be sure you watch that video. The Google form is the only homework for Wednesday night. Though if you did not complete your why colors, or I should say why leaves change color worksheet, make sure that's done by Wednesday night, because otherwise that will be marked as late. Another far out project to remember, leaf collection due October 31st. So that is under your classwork. You could find it under classwork, leaf collection, so on and so forth. All right, and if I were to show you where this is called the October 20th assignment. And then everything else is written here, is posted here. So short video on forests, complete the Google form. There's the calendar if you have any questions. And make sure you join the Google Meet on future days, which can be found on the calendar, as well as PowerSchool. All right, everybody. Well, I think that will do it for today's forest types lecture. So the notes for this will likely be very important on a future quiz. And I hope we enjoyed it. All right. Take care.